Microdosing. How to create the most value from a microdose of, I'm going to focus on psilocybin or Stropharia cubensis mushrooms as the natural source, or LSD. Now, you get the most value with a substance of any kind, be it sugar, an exercise enhancer, a vitamin. You get the most value when you understand the function that it serves and you partner with that substance to maximize the result. In other words, aligning the conscious mind with the intended result. So one of the things that's been found at Johns Hopkins in studies of psilocybin is that it relaxes and puts aside the acculturated area of the brain. Now, what this means, for those of you that may not have traveled the world, is someone who is raised, an identical twin who's raised as an American versus raised as a Thai versus, in the Thai culture with a Thai family, takes on the shape of their culture. And every culture is good at something. And every culture has blind spots. Every culture is sick in the sense of imbalanced. And the medicine that which does restore the balance, the medicine always lies outside the boundaries of the culture. Sometimes it lies in a culture's taboo. Some cultures have a taboo of leaving the town, leaving the community. But if we understand that it is the nature of a culture to have a shape and to keep that shape, to provide a sense of familiarity, and that initially and or over time that shape develops an asymmetry. It leans off to the left somewhere. And that makes those raised in that culture, it's kind of like, if you were to provide a culture and put a virus in that culture, there is a culture that is optimal for life, for growth, for regeneration. And then there are cultures that, are too acidic or too alkaline or, don't have enough of this or that minerals for a virus to grow. A virus simply being a self-organizing pattern that replicates. We are, in a sense, a virus. And the culture that allows us to grow is a culture of balance, of heart, mind, and body, of the masculine and the feminine, inner and outer, and in which the full cycle of life, the birth, the maturing, the education, the growing, the blossoming, the waning, the death, the dying, the entire circle is honored in a healthy culture. Now, America likes sweet and salty in the 5 flavors. It likes young and hot in the relationship cycle. It doesn't like death. It doesn't like black. It doesn't like bitterness. It doesn't like sophistication in presence, in consciousness. It likes good or bad, And so America, like every other culture, is leaning hard off here to the left, and it's got quite a wobble to it. So to provide medicine, for this lump-like, heavy-leaning shape, to provide medicine, you want to look to something that is the opposite. America is very yang, so you look for yin to medicate the imbalance. Americans are very structured with their time, so you create more spontaneity. But not spontaneity to addict, but spontaneity to engage, to relate, to explore the feminine. And this can provide medicine. Now, doing that within a diseased culture can be difficult, and so going abroad to, say, the Philippines, which is a much more feminine culture by nature. It's very strong Western dominance, but by nature, it's ambiance. Just the temperature, the landscape is, colder countries and colder cultures have to plan for the winter, so they're more masculine by demand, by nature. Tropical cultures that have an abundance of tropical fruits and foods and fishes and warm weather year-round and strong family ties. This is, a culture that can be very spontaneous and in doing so very feminine, and as such a very joy-filled, a very innocent culture. So if we understand what we're trying to do, which is healing, which is to balance the imbalance, which begins with a diagnosis, then we can look for the environment, the people, the culture, the specific set and setting, the substance that will induce the conscious mind of the individual needing healing into the state of balance, which leads to grace, which leads to well-being. The sphere is the most graceful shape. It takes the least energy to move of any shape. Triangle, very difficult. A line, even more so. That's why when you have black and white paradigms of good or bad, you've got a lot of fear and a lot of rigidity present in the space. When you have a lot of fear and a lot of simplicity and a lot of rigidity, it takes enormous amounts of energy to move something just a little bit. And usually it's one or the other. It's like you're pushing. You can't stop if if you've got a stick and it's leaning here and you try and lift the stick up, it'll fall back down. You have to lift it all the way up, all the way up, all the way up. And you have to be careful if it'll flip. And now it's still a stick. It's still black and white. Now things have just reversed. And so it's a much less graceful shape, shall we say. A sphere, very easy to move this way and that way and be graceful. So when we can restore the balance, the symmetry, psilocybin and I believe LSD, though I'm not familiar with the study, it's just very similar in effect. Psilocybin releases the acculturated brain for a while. And in doing so, the consciousness is free to look out of the balanced eyes of the psyche unfettered with the cultural biases that have been programmed into the neurology of tens upon tens of thousands of interactions within the culture. I know as an American man that I have 10 seconds to play warmly with a child in an American playground before I am perceived as a threat by a majority of parents. This is escalated many times if I initiate the interaction. When I'm playing radio control car, in a playground, and the kids run up after the car, it's much safer as long as the car is in between me and the children. But this is an acculturated phenomena. When I go to other countries and other cultures, I get to be a human being. I get to be intelligent for showing interest in children. I get to be kind for being kind. In the United States, I get to be a pedophile. And so this is a very important bit of programming, because as a result of that, I actively avoid United States children I would enjoy interacting with, specifically to avoid the paranoia that has been programmed into the majority of the population. And that goes away, meaning when you behave and buy into, in order to avoid the trauma or the hostility or the stress of misinformed adults or misinformed grown-ups living in the culture, then there's a certain part buying into the delusion, buying into the fact that I must be scary because all these people are looking at me weird because I'm smiling or being kind to their children, as opposed to I must be a human being who values the innocence, the wonder that the culture decimates in so many of its adults. So these things fall away for a matter of hours. And so I get to look through a lens in which I see myself outside of the wounds of the cult, outside of the imbalances of the cult, unfettered by the thousands upon thousands of messages that have come towards me saying, this is who you are. And I get to see from the inside out, this is who I am. I'm kind, I'm alive, I'm curious, I'm interested, I want to do this, I want to do that, I'm happy, I'm contented. This is me, and it's nice to spend some time with me without the burden of a sociopathic world's projections placed upon me, and the sadness of being separated from myself. It's a great sadness. And part of the acculturation of being sociopathic is that we're expected to say things that suggest oceans of pain, and to say them as if they have no meaning. Because in a non-sociopathic cult, in a non-sociopathic culture, cult, the root word simply, we cry at such loss of human soul, at such loss of trust and empathy. We cry at what has been lost. But of course, the cult says that crying is weak because it's feminine, and we're all chauvinists. Because we believe money is more important than human beings, that the body is more important than the spirit, that inner development and awareness is not as important as the size of your house or the size of your muscles or what kind of brands you're wearing. So these get lifted away with psilocybin, and my experience is they get lifted away with LSD. And if you can lean into that if you can lean into that, if you can understand the purpose of the medicine is to provide the consciousness with an unfettered view of the self for a period of time, a matter of hours, during which time we can reorient by making a distinction between a more neutral perspective and the perspective and bias of the culture that we're in. This distinction leads to more self-awareness and more cultural examination. And this is its potency. Now, a microdose is a sub-psychedelic threshold, meaning you're not seeing flashing lights, hallucinations, visions, blurring shapes, anything like that. It's still good to not operate fine, heavy equipment, meaning you don't want to be driving, a crane operator, anything like that. And you have to learn. It's a process of understanding a substance and its relationship with you. Its partnership with you, and you're partnering with it for a specific agenda. But I find that I receive the most value when I'm open, when I have nothing on the agenda. Even as a microdose, I don't like to have any work scheduled, and in which I can just be present and lean towards those things, open to those insights and possibilities that let me transcend my limited thought. Now, this can be my limited self-judgment because I'm not fitting into the culture. When you have an unhealthy culture, the full psyche will not fit into the culture. So what doesn't fit into America? Shame doesn't fit into America. Grief doesn't fit into America. A long black hearse and limo is a poor substitute for the freedom to grieve real tears and release all of the energies stored up around all of the physiological and emotional experiences of that person for a lifetime. To dance, to grieve, to be together, to talk. How many of us have that when someone dies? A majority of who we are as human and spiritual beings, as conscious beings, does not fit into American culture. Most of our intensity, most of our feelings, most of our truths, long stretches of uninterrupted time, spaces for magic and mystery, town celebrations, where a whole town would get together to grieve something or to honor something. The initiation into adulthood by honoring the spirit. The majority of who we are does not fit within the cult. But we still retain the core needs Maslow outlined in survival, security, love, and belonging. And love and belonging still retains its association with the group. Am I normal? Do I belong based on, am I doing the imbalanced things that everyone else is doing? psilocybin and LSD help to transcend this imbalance by shutting down the area in the brain that has been cross-wired and, where the whole program of interconnected synapses have been developed, where most of consciousness runs through that sector and says what is and isn't okay based on my culture. It closes those down, and you get a chance to see. Now, if that's what you want to see, if that's who you want to meet, the you, outside of the lens of your culture, the you that you've been denied with the constant pressure to fit in and integrate and be normal, then you will get the most out of your experience. But more importantly, if that's who you want to meet, and if you're reaching out to that one, you are going to need a lot less of the substance, just a tiny little bit, in order to say hello, in order to attune to what's different, what do I see here that I did not and could not see, that I didn't and couldn't see before. And so this is the essence of why a psychedelic substance can be a friend, can be an ally. And if you're partnering and preparing the space, you don't need as much dynamite to blow through the wall. You can work to let that part come into your life, in part by learning from the one that you meet on the substance. Now, how can you learn? There's so many ways, but it begins by tuning in, creating a neutral space, and then examining your life, examining your relationships and saying, well, what can we do here and what can we do there, and how about this changing and how about that changing? Examining those relationships and writing it down. You can get out a camera like this and record things, but at the very least, writing it down. You can do an audio recording, but in some way capturing what you see through these eyes that you don't see through your ordinary eyes. Because in doing so, it gives you a clue of your cultural bias. It gives you a conscious awareness. You don't always necessarily want to do all of the things that you see as being practical and a great thing to do while you're on psychedelics. But if you understand that while you're on psychedelics, you're generally seeing a more balanced picture, and while you're not, you're seeing through the lens that is always imbalanced of your culture, then you can start bringing the two slowly together in a way that is regulated, in a way that makes sense.